Hi, and welcome to Aviation Careers Podcast. I am Carl Valeri, and I'll be your host today. And today we're going to talk about if you get a letter from the FAA and it's actually an investigation, what should you do? Should you ignore it or comply with it? We're going to answer this and many more questions about FAA investigations coming up next in this episode. But first, a big shout out to all of our friends out there that have paid it forward. As you know, we have a Pay It Forward program where we help people get those free scholarships guides. It's got over $120 million in scholarships in it, and it's only $10 for a year access. We update it monthly. You can get one for free, aviationcareerspodcast.com/free, using that coupon code Pay It Forward, and you can help people just like those people are Patreons and all the people that have been paying it forward by actually just giving $1 a month. And after we collect $10, we give away a free scholarships guide. So imagine what you could do for somebody's life by just helping them and giving away a scholarships guide. So please check that out. Become a patron, and that actually will help them, or any other way that you can donate to the Pay It Forward program. So aviationcareerspodcast.com/pay it forward. Anyway, on to the show. Like I said, there's people out there that have talk to me and talk to other people about what to do in certain situations. Say if the FAA gives you a number to call, should you make that call? Well, and that's actually in another video. We'll give a link to that one. That was really popular. But today we're going to talk about if you're involved in an investigation, what you should do. Should you actually respond? And today, to help me with that, is Chris Pizzala, and he is actually an aviation attorney. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Carl. Great to be back.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but I'm really excited to have you on, especially for this, because it is a topic that through our career coaching, people have a lot of challenges as far as what they should do and what to move forward with. By the way, with the career coaching, we did start doing this mentorship program where we meet once a month. It's only $20 a month, and you can actually find out more, aviationcareerspodcast.com/coaching. And these are the kind of topics that we come up with, and you can ask questions for free there. And Chris has actually joined us on one of those. It's been a lot of fun, and it's kind of cool because it's a live event, and we take your questions, and it's pretty awesome, the different questions we get. So you can ask anything. It's a little different than here because it's kind of unplugged and unfiltered and uncensored. We do censor the recording afterwards, which we sometimes have to do. But Chris, going back to that whole FAA investigation, I mentioned a letter in the mail, so we should back up first and say, what is an FAA investigation, first of all?
So the FAA conducts investigation anytime they need more information on something, whether they're working on your medical application and they want more information, or whether they think something's happened, like an accident, an incident, or a potential violation. So there's a lot of forms this can come in. The one that we see most often is contact from the Flight Standard District Office, the FSDO, and that usually has to do with the way in which an aircraft was operated or the way in which it was maintained.
Gotcha. So when I mentioned that whole letter of investigations, that the flight school I worked with, there was 9 of them that went out to the different instructors. It can come in a different form than that?
Yes. Some of the investigations are a bit more informal, so we'll see an email or a phone call as opposed to a letter. And that tells us a little bit about the importance. So for instance, I had a phone call from an inspector a number of years ago, and he wanted to just know about a bird strike that I'd had departing in a general aviation aircraft. And actually, it turns out we hadn't hit the bird, but I'd called it into the tower just to make sure that the debris, if there was any, was removed. And the FAA just wanted it for data collection. So that wasn't a very long one. Of course, I just wrote a brief statement, and they gave me an email address to send it to. So not all the investigations are a huge affair, and they don't always come as letters. But however they come, you want to engage with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you my story. I had someone investigating an incident that we had, and the FAA was investigating it. He just had a couple questions, and it turns out that the report from the fire department was not correct. They checked the wrong box, and so it was really that simple. He just wanted to know what happened, so we kind of went on from there. Sometimes it can get a little more involved, and we're gonna kind of talk about that later. Sometimes it might be time to talk to the FAA with somebody else, or if you're nervous about it, get someone to coach you along, like an attorney and that type of thing. But anyway, so tell us a little bit about, do you have any examples maybe as far as FAA investigation that we can talk about here?
So one of the more recent ones we've had was an individual who had an aircraft incident, and it was a minor incident, but while the FAA was looking at it, they discovered that he was using basic med, and he had missed a step, and he wasn't quite current with the basic med. And so the FAA opened a separate investigation into that basic med, and that really became the issue more than the original incident. And on the advice of a bunch of other pilots, he decided to ignore it and not talk to the FAA. So he ignored the letters, he ignored all the contact, and eventually the inspectors became frustrated and they sent this over to the FAA legal department that sent it out for an enforcement action. And at that point, his certificates were revoked.
Wow.
So that's pretty serious. Now, what's interesting is, we hear this story and there wasn't a lot we could do. A week later, I get a phone call, another person, almost exactly the same kind of incident, also basic med, also not quite current on the basic med. And this one, he worked with the inspector. He admitted to the mistake. He corrected it. He told the inspector that he had fixed it, and the inspector said, okay, that's great. I'll mark that off as taken care of. And that's as far as it went. And both these people, very similar, both were basic med, and both of them rectified the problem right after they realized it. And the only difference is that one of them talked to the inspector and one ignored him. The one that talked to him, the problem never went to the legal department, it went away. The one who ignored the inspector, who ignored the investigation, doesn't have certificates now.
Oh, that's a big difference. Some people really shouldn't talk to an investigator right away. I think they should get some coaching, but I think that the main advice here is definitely talk to them eventually. You may put them off for just a second, say, hey, listen, what should I say during this conversation? But there are some people that really shouldn't. I mean, and I'll give you a good example. And in this example, it was preemptive investigation, as I call it. And that's kind of a weird term. What do I mean by that? Someone actually called the FAA to talk about something that happened that hadn't even started as far as an investigation yet. It happened the next day. But that's something that actually made his case worse because of the fact that said so many things he shouldn't have said in an initial conversation. Because sometimes when you are initially involved in something, your emotions get the most of you instead of logic, and sometimes it's good just to wait a second. So I think that's kind of what I tell people to do. If you're that type of person that is prone to a lot of emotions, you might want to kind of give it a second, talk to somebody, talk to an attorney, talk to a career coach and say, hey, listen, what should I do? Let's calm down, let's talk about it and move forward with something that we can go forward with as far as a normal conversation. For the most part, most people can. I'm just saying these are the extreme cases where, that's really important. But as far as, I'm the thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is like, we talked about what FAA investigation is. It could be just someone calling up, say, hey, Carl, we want to talk to you about this plane that had a fire and blah, blah, blah. Was it really on fire? No, it wasn't. But there was, other things. I mean, what other, like you said, formal, informal, what are the different modalities of contact from the FAA?
Well, the formal method, of course, is via letter to the pilot's address, which is why it's always important to keep your address up to date in the airman database with the FAA. But additionally, we see phone calls, we see emails. It's not uncommon to get a voicemail from the FAA. And, we treat those the same as a letter, which is that, we take the time to collect the information to answer the question the FAA has, and then we usually have the pilot or the mechanic or the person involved call them back directly.
And the type of person that's beginning this investigation, they come from different branches of the FAA. It could be the FSDO, FAA medical branch. What else am I guess the air traffic control, where else?
Drug enforcement has their own investigators. So we see that. We also see the security department. So if it's an undisclosed DUI, it'll come from one place as opposed to, say, if FAA medical is just asking more questions about a health condition that you disclosed. So these investigations can come from different places. But again, wherever they come from, two things. One is you don't want to ignore them. And two is it doesn't hurt to speak with an attorney. Obviously, when you get a phone number from ATC, you need to call that one back relatively quickly. You really can't wait a day. But for anything else, any other contact from the FSDO or from another agency department, you can take the time to wait a day or two, get some information, like you said, get yourself collected. And if you need to speak with an attorney before you call them back. Okay.
So when you do call them back and there is an investigation open, how do we know that? I mean, if I'm getting a call from somebody, and I get there's, like you said, formal, informal investigations. How do I know how far this is going to go, or don't I?
Unfortunately, really don't. If they're calling, then obviously they've opened a file and they're looking for information. If it's a bird strike, that's going to be a pretty quick file. You give them the information, close it. We have one right now where the FAA is looking into a pilot's logbooks, and they're taking their time with it, and that's a problem because it's stressing out the pilot, not knowing, what step to take next, and they may not bother to tell him when they close the investigation. They don't always bother to send a letter saying, hey, we've taken care of this. So, that's one of the reasons it's really good to engage with the inspectors, is because if you're on good terms with the inspector, hopefully they'll let you know when they close that investigation. And if it does get transferred to the legal department for legal action, that's unfortunate, but at least you would know ahead of time and could start preparing for any kind of legal situation.
This becomes very important when someone's looking towards working for an airline or any employment in aviation. How do they determine whether this has been closed or not?
Well, in most of these cases, these files are closed at the FSDO office or at the respective office, and most of the stuff never goes on the pilot's record. So, for instance, the bird strike, that was just a data collection. They're not all that interested. We also see investigations for engine failures because they want to make sure that other engines aren't affected, and they're not usually going to put that into the pilot's record. So, in most cases, this stuff really does not affect an employment, unless the FAA takes an action. Now, if you get your certificates revoked or suspended, then that will go into the pilot record database, and now that will be something that a future employer can see.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that. If it's gone into your record, and by the way, I just want to say outright, yes, you can get hired if there's been an investigation or you've had an action, if you had an accident, incident, if your certificates have been revoked. I'll give you an instance. I have a pilot that has had all their certificates revoked, was able to get them all back eventually, and is now flying for a major airline. It took a while to get back there, and there's a lot that has to go into explaining during an interview, thus the reason we do the coaching. How do we craft a message to go out towards these people that are trying to hire you so that you can make a good impression, even though you have this in your background? So that's a really important thing. So going back to what you said on the compliance, if you have like a compliance action, et cetera, what happens then? I mean, you have like an issue where it is your fault. What normally happens afterwards?
So sometimes that happens, and I've talked about this. Early on, when the FAA came out with the compliance program, this is over a decade ago, I had an altitude deviation. I read back the correct altitude ATC, but I put the wrong one into the pre-selector. And I was off by 1,000 feet, so we had a phone number, and we called, we discussed it. And a few days later, the investigator called, and we discussed that, and I told them exactly what happened. The other pilot spoke with them as well, and they said, okay, just be more careful in the future, and that's good. We've marked this as complete. And so compliance action is really about solving the problem. And when somebody's done something unintentionally, it's just a mistake, the FAA doesn't really want to revoke your certificates. What they want to do is make sure you learn from it and that you don't make that mistake or a similar one going forward. So in a lot of cases, if the issue has been resolved and we've learned from it, they'll place that into the compliance program where the investigators can work with you. And sometimes it's as simple as my case, where they just have a conversation. And sometimes they want a little more. They'll ask you to fly with an instructor or complete an online course, and then they consider that sufficient to resolve the issue. And anytime that they will do that, anytime they'll work with you, anytime they'll give you the compliance program, that's worth doing. That's always the way to solve the problem, because it's quick, it's easy, and it doesn't require an attorney.
One of the things I think that's really great about the compliance program, especially for those that are listening that are going through their certificates right now, there's a more formal process like at the airlines, and that's actually involves a lot of times a union. But as a person that's now has their instruments working towards a commercial, and all of a sudden you have this compliance issue, many times they send you to somebody at the FAA safety team, and I've done that in the past when I was doing the FAA safety team, where we would work with somebody and then realizing that this person, as long as they comply with the training, they're going to get through this. It's all about their attitude. And that's something I do want to stress. is that when you do have a compliance issue or a compliance action, when you do have a compliance action, make sure you have a good attitude going forward, because I know when I've been asked by the FAA inspector, remember I'm just a civilian, don't work for the FAA, when they ask me after I've done one of these, what was the person's attitude? That's like the most important thing to them. Were they willing to take on this new training or this additional training? And going forward, do you think they'll be a safe pilot? And that's always what they've asked every time I've done something like that. So just make sure that you approach this with a good attitude. I know it's kind of tough, but remember that person that's doing that training wants to help you to move forward. Just like you were saying, they don't want to take away your license. They want to help you. That's for sure. And it's like one of the things that I think we don't realize a lot of times is whenever and to back up into your training, whenever we're in a situation where we're having a challenge, we're talking about compliances, just remember everybody wants you to succeed. They really want to try to help you succeed, and that's for sure. But as far as that's concerned, and I'm sure you've probably worked with cases like this where they send them to like the FAA safety team and have somebody do some remedial training, and then it comes back. How do you kind of navigate all that? As far as completing it and going forward.
The plan's different for each pilot and each situation. It's tailored to the particular concern that was highlighted by an incident or an accident. And so in those instances, the FAA will usually come up with a proposed plan, and usually we go with that. Whatever the FISO is offering or suggesting, whether it's specific courses or maybe a flight with instructor. We did have one case where they wanted an FAA-approved instructor, a specifically selected one, because our client had a jet aircraft. And they wanted to make sure that he was proficient in his jet aircraft. And they went up and they had a great flight and no issues, and he's back out flying again. So for the most part, they will work with you as long as what's happened is unintentional. And like you said, you have to have a good attitude. If you don't have a good attitude with the FAA, it's a lot harder.
Absolutely. There is a point, though, that I do advise some of my clients that they should seek the advice of an attorney. And normally that is the point where something egregious has happened or something that is maybe been escalated much further than you would have wanted it to as the person that's involved in this investigation. So as far as what I just said, what other advice do you give to somebody that is thinking of hiring an attorney involved in an investigation?
Well, first of all, most attorneys, including my firm, generally do the consultations for free. So there's no harm in at least calling and getting some information and getting a opinion as to whether or not this is really an issue and to what extent you might actually need a lawyer. A lot of times people call me, and what I tell them is, I think you're okay. I think you should go meet with the FAA and take the steps that they've placed. And, I put myself out of work. I'm like, you don't need to hire me. You can go work with the FAA. And that's the honest answer. Yeah. It's only really when we get into things where there's something not quite right. Maybe the pilot's flight time's not right. There was a certification issue, or we've gone to the legal department. Or something more serious. Maybe somebody's falsified some kind of a document or statement. Then that's the time where you're really going to have to engage with the attorneys. But it certainly doesn't hurt to call an attorney and just get an opinion, especially before you call back to the FAA.
And that's really important. Get some advice, and like you said, usually it's for free at first. Can you help me? I have emails all the time, feedback@aviationcareerspodcast.com. I'll answer them real quickly and say, hey, I think you should do this. I think you see an attorney, or we really need to have a discussion. And you can usually tell fairly quickly. But one of the things I really want to stress is that the effect on your career, it can actually be something that you think is really bad, but it isn't. I think we overblow some of these things sometimes, and I get it. It's your situation, and it's personal. But when you're involved in something, just remember there's many other people that have been involved in these type of things. They just don't talk about it. It's because they talk to us, they talk to attorneys, and then they resolve it, and that's it. They're done. And that's something I think is really important when you're involved in something like this, be very careful who you talk to. It's kind of like in your career. When you're talking to someone, tell them, hey, I want to become an airline pilot. Be careful who you talk to, because there's so many people that want to squash your dreams. They also want to squash your hopes, like in this case, if you had an investigation. And normally if you talk to a career coach in aviation or somebody like an aviation attorney, they'll usually tell you, hey, listen, I've seen this before, you'll make it through. I know you can do it. Or Chris, as far as that's concerned, as far as hiring an attorney, tell us a little bit about what you folks do and what law firm you're with.
So, of course, I'm with the law offices of Robert M. Strumer. Bob Strumer is my senior partner. He's a private pilot. And then we have a third attorney we work with, Mark Dahl, who is a former C-130 pilot. He's now a full-time pilot for one of the major airlines. And I can't top him. He landed a C-130 in Antarctica on skis multiple times. He actually did this for years. So I think that's really cool that Mark did that. But in addition to pilots, of course, we're attorneys. And one of the big things we do is a lot of coaching, actually. A lot of times we work in the background. Clients call us and we provide advice of, what information to provide, how to write out statements. A lot of pilots don't feel comfortable writing statements to the FAA, so we'll help them edit and draft those. And then we also, provide advice on whatever the next steps are. And on occasion, we end up, of course, in a legal matter, working with the FAA attorneys or going into court. But usually we try to resolve this earlier. And like I said, a lot of times we just work in the background. We don't actually reach out to the FAA because the FAA likes to work with pilots. Despite the fact that they have attorneys, they don't like working with attorneys. So, yeah, the agency would much rather, because most FAA employees are pilots, right? They're people that want to engage in aviation. They don't want to deal with lawyers. So, pilot to pilot is really a great way to make a connection.
Absolutely. I agree. But where can they find you online if they need you?
So, of course, we're at strumerlaw.com, and that has all of our information.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else before we wrap up here?
I think the main thing is just, don't ignore it. If anybody ever reaches out from the FAA, make sure you take some steps to respond to that. And otherwise, don't worry about it. Go fly and, enjoy the field.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Again, if you get a letter that you're involved in an FAA investigation or you get a call, what should you do? You should not ignore it. But if you have any questions as far as what to do moving forward, maybe before you actually respond, talk to us here at aviationcareerspodcast.com, the attorneys at strumerlaw.com, and they can help you. We can help you move forward with that investigation. But make sure you do it quickly. Don't let it simmer, because they will follow up eventually. But most importantly, no matter what you're doing, say you're here looking at this and trying to prepare yourself for that investigation, or you're preparing yourself for your next interview, well, we can help you. We have our coaching services, and that's at aviationcareerspodcast.com/coaching. We've also started a new mentorship program that's been awesome. It's at least once a month. We meet for an hour. I do an industry update in the beginning. And the second part of it is we answer your questions, and it's online, it's live, and please challenge me with your questions. If you can't make it, feedback at aviationcareerspodcast.com to answer or ask those questions. We'll answer them online, and you can actually listen to all the past career mentorship programs that we've had. It's a lot of fun. If you want that one-on-one coaching, we also do that. So aviationcareerspodcast.com/coaching. But make sure that after you're done listening or watching this on YouTube or any other of the streaming services, make sure you take action today. Make sure you take that one step today to move forward in your career and in your life. And I know that you're going to get to your career goal sooner than you think. We'll talk to you next episode. Safe flying out there.